Welcome to Native Yoga Toddcast. So happy you are here. My goal with this channel is to bring inspirational speakers to the mic in the field of yoga, massage, bodywork, and beyond. Follow us at Native Yoga and check us out at nativeyogacenter.com. All right, let's begin. Welcome to Native Yoga Toddcast. I'm your host, Todd McLaughlin, and today I am honored to be joined by Andrew Eppler. He's a longtime Ashtanga Yoga teacher. He's a documentary filmmaker, and he's also the founder of Ashtanga Yoga Studio in Norman, Oklahoma. Andrew has been deeply immersed in the Mysore Yoga lineage for decades, studying and documenting the living traditions of yoga in India. Through his projects, the Mysore Yoga Traditions, and the new documentary he's working on, Kings and Yogis, he's helping to preserve and share the history, philosophy, and the cultural context of yoga as it has evolved in Mysore. In this episode, we explore Andrew's journey, his insights on balancing authenticity with accessibility, and the deeper roots of yoga's evolution in India. Whoa, that's all I can say. Wow, I needed this. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Incredible conversation. I'm so glad you are here. Thank you for your support. And I just want to thank all the wonderful people in this tradition for holding it down and passing it on. And here we are. Please go follow his work, Andrew's work, on his website, Mysore-yoga-traditions.com. He has some incredible things coming up, opportunities to go to India and practice and study and learn. Also, you can study with him and the work that he does with gathering all these academics and yoga practitioners and philosophy teachers and Sanskrit masters and all these folks in India, making it accessible for us that are curious and want to learn more. So with all that being said, let's get to it. So excited to have this opportunity to both meet and speak with Andrew Eppler. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Todd. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh man, it's really an honor and a privilege because I am a fan of your work. I have been following the work that you do. I very recently, finally, got a chance to watch your incredible documentary, Mysore Yoga Traditions, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So I'm excited to have this chance to ask you some questions about your experience as a documentarian, but also as a Ashtanga and or yoga practitioner for decades now. Can you tell me a little bit about how your yoga journey began and what specifically, what led you specifically toward Mysore and Ashtanga?
Well, when I was 14, a friend of my father's came to visit, and he was practicing Ashtanga Yoga. And he taught my father and I, and with my dad's sort of guidance, I stuck with it and eventually began to travel. And so I didn't even know anything about yoga. Ashtanga was all I knew for the first quite a few years of my experience with it. But it was very fortuitous, and it definitely shaped my life to a certain extent.
Wow. You were 14 when you took your first official yoga practice.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's amazing. Did you grow up in, I understand you grew up in Oklahoma, is that correct?
I did, right in the Bible Belt with all the crazies.
I know. I've had a chance to visit Oklahoma. A friend of mine owns a studio in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and so I guess I'm curious. How did you and your dad in Oklahoma? How did this situation occur where somebody comes to your house and is an Ashtanga yoga practitioner? What's a little bit more of the backstory there?
Well, there is quite a long backstory. I don't know how much of that we want to get into, but my dad was one of the early hippies in Oklahoma, the first guy to show up with long hair. And so when he was, I don't know what age, like 18 or 19, he left Oklahoma hitchhiking with 6 cents in his pocket, made his way to Haight-Ashbury, and eventually on to Hawaii, where he met Cliff Barber, who was our first teacher, and they had a long interaction. And my dad sort of helped Cliff find his way to a more spiritual lifestyle. And then Cliff went and studied with Nancy Gilgoff and David Williams, and then later Patabi Joyce, and he came back to visit, years later.
Wow.
And I was really just a kid, and I didn't have any idea what I was getting into. In fact, I remember thinking that I really wanted to levitate. And I thought that if anything could get you there, probably yoga would be a great choice. So I thus began my journey.
Well, at age 14, how did you understand there was such a thing called levitation? Had you read Paramahansa Yogananda's work? Was there a text that you came across? Did your dad say, Andrew, there's this idea called levitation? Do you remember how you, well, because when I think back, I remember one of the first potential glimpses at yoga I had was watching the Addams Family of the Mr. Gomez doing a headstand. And I remember as a kid watching that black and white footage going, what is he doing? What is that? How's he doing that? And so I'm curious, how did you get that first, more other little glimpses of this idea of something like even levitation?
Um, Trying to remember, to
That's
be
okay.
honest.
All right. I was just curious
I
if there's, yeah, yeah.
My father was really into all kinds of different spiritual practices and esoteric philosophies, Eastern philosophies. He was also, we come from a line of Christian ministers, Nazarene ministers, and
Whoa.
I grew up with the Bible, and I mean, if you ask me, I am a Christian. I was like, I have a Christian name. I was born in this Christian culture, and I'm proud of that, actually.
Yeah.
But um, as far as first glimpses of esoteric ideology or thinking, I think it was just kind of a household thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I've also had a lifelong fascination with magic
Mm.
and anything which is apparently impossible, real or imagined, trick or miracle, whatever that area has always fascinated me. And so I spent quite a few years trying to figure out how to levitate in all kinds of different ways.
Well, that's so cool, man. I also grew up in a very Bible-based family. I'm curious. Well, I remember thinking about Jesus, hearing about miracle stories. I'm guessing that obviously played a little bit into your fascination with the potentiality of some of these concepts. Do you feel like that played a large role in your journey to India and curiosity with India culture?
To a degree, I mean, I did study magic in India extensively, and
Wow.
trying to learn
But
about things like the mango tree that grows and the rope trick and some of these classical illusions that India
wow.
is famous for. Um, I I always had a pull towards the idea that the inside world was more important than the outside world, and that somehow being happy had to do with your inside, the way you see life. And my parents were instrumental in that. I have a lot to thank my father and my mother for. They were always very supportive of what was not really a typical trajectory for a young kid. I went to India when I was 18. Stayed gone for a year and a half. Of course, I'd missed my parents so much and my family, but I was on this adventure, and I studied with Patabi Joyce in 1990 and saw a bit of Europe and made a bunch of friends all over the world, and that was a big turning point.
Wow.
I missed my family so much, and I got home, and of course I was happy to see everybody, but I sort of looked around Oklahoma and I thought, oh my God, where is this weird place? I shouldn't be stuck here, and it really kind of wired me up to be very motivated to take every opportunity not to be stuck in Oklahoma. And it took some decades to kind of become like at peace with Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a wonderful place.
Yes.
Every place is a wonderful place if you're in the right mind space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if not, everywhere is hell. It's equally true. So
Great point.
yeah, I'm proud of my Oklahoma roots and my Christian upbringing and my culture, as you know, crazy as it is to some people. I think we're all at an equal advantage or disadvantage, regardless of culture and religion, and these kinds of ways that our life gets defined, at least at the outset.
Man, I love hearing this because it's so true, huh? Like when you say we're at an equal advantage, no matter where we've been born into and whatever cultural background we have, most seekers, we tend to, in the outset, maybe in relation to the hero's journey, think there's got to be something better out there, somewhere else. There's the grass has to be greener. There's got to be a more spiritual place to live. There has to be a place that will be easy to be who I am. Or if I think I know who I am, there's got to be somewhere better. And then it almost leads us right back to where we started again. Like,
I think it's true. Now, I wouldn't like to gloss over the fact that I'm lucky to be born in a country that's not at war, at least not right now, and
wow. Oh,
not in
yeah. Oh,
a country that's,
oh, thank you, Andrew. I know. Yeah,
you
at
know,
least not right
like
now.
I think I've
Oh,
shared the advantage of being from a first world country and having an opportunity to travel. And
yeah,
I want to
yeah.
express gratitude for those things. But it is so true that we can see the dogma and hypocrisy in our own traditions very clearly. And then we see some other tradition with different customs and marks on the forehead and flowing clothes and all of this very exotic, seemingly exotic stuff about it. And we think, oh my God, these guys are like, that's so it. And I want to be like them. I'm going to change my name. I'm going to change my everything. And then we realize I'm the same dodo I was before. I just have a different name now. It's like, okay, I still have a lot to work on under any name, under any guise. I'm really all about just kind of being who we are and
Oh man.
facing life as best we can.
Beautifully said. Well said. Your documentary, Mysore Yoga Traditions, is phenomenal. I highly
Thank
recommend
you.
everybody listening to check it out. Very easy to rent on Vimeo. We can go to your website. Just want to make sure I get the exact MysoreYogaTraditions.com.
That's it.
And you click the button and you watch it. It's really well done. So I have a lot of questions for you. First, from the documentarian or documentary perspective, at what point in your life did you get a glimpse that, you know what, I want to document, I want to highlight, and then all of the work that I'm guessing goes into camera, lighting, coordinating interviews, who to interview, how to make connections and inroads into the world of getting people to open up. Where did that start for you? What was that kind of spark that got you curious?
Well, long story. I started studying with BNS Iyengar in probably 95. And I always had this special connection with him. And it wasn't that I thought that somebody else's yoga wasn't as good. I just really loved this person and created a connection that I felt like you shouldn't dig many shallow wells. At some point, I just felt that he had so much to teach me. And I loved the talks that we had. And it was very impactful. So anyway, at some point, I had this crazy idea that I was going to invite him to Oklahoma and he was going to teach at my yoga studio. And so I figured he would probably say no, but in the end he said yes, and he came.
Wow.
And long story there, visas and logistics, etc. But
I can imagine.
I he was like 89, I think, at the time, maybe 86 or 7. I can't remember, but late 80s. And it occurred to me that when this guy crosses over, when he dies, it would be a shame not to document all these teachings that he has, because he's an encyclopedic mind, and he has this huge repertoire and worldview, etc. So I asked him if I could make a documentary about him, and he said no, and that he didn't want. He was really not into self-promotion. He's not, he just teaches whoever comes. He's very averse to trying to put himself out there. And I kept after him, and then on his 90th birthday, he finally agreed. I was able to get a letter to him, and he agreed. And then so some friends of mine and I, students and friends, Joey Paz and Bryce Delbridge, and Joey's brother Dallas was our videographer, and another dear friend called Kelly O'Rourke. They were the ones that kind of banded together with me, and we bought tickets and gathered up some equipment, and then he changed his mind at the last second and said, "No,
Ah.
actually, I don't want to do it."
Oh.
And we,
You're like,
so we were like, we
whoa.
got together, like, okay, guys, what are we doing here? If you want to bow out, you can, but
So you're in,
I
you're
want
in
to go
India at
study
this
with him.
point. You already got to India, have everything organized, and that's when
We
you
we were still in America,
still in America. Okay.
actually,
Okay.
so it wasn't too late to cancel the tickets, and but a trip to India is a big deal for us anyway. Just to make the space in your life and come up with the resources and all that. It was never simple. So we felt like the runway was clear, and we wanted to have this adventure no matter what,
Yes.
and
Yes.
see our teacher. And so we got there, and we couldn't even really mention the documentary. We kind of did, but Guruji's very fierce, and if you start trying to
I can understand.
bring up something and ask him to do something like that could all get very tenuous. So the shortest version of it, we started looking for other people to interview and other voices, and just seeing what we could find. And there was a moment where I went to see the principal of the Maharaja's Sanskrit college, and we were going to go to his house, and one of my Indian friends took me, and I assumed it was going to be a white collar kind of professional academic person, but he was a swami in orange robes doing puja, and
Yeah.
he asked me to put ghee on the ceremonial fire when he met me, and it was just hot and hectic, and lots of people, very crowded and chaotic, and um, so I did, and this little deity moved across a bowl of water. There's some deities floating in water, and one moved, and then he kind of picked it up and he clapped his chest and he said something in Sanskrit, and I didn't really understand what the deal was, but for him that was an omen, and it meant that I was like the right person to receive information, and that gave us access to the Maharaja Sanskrit College, to all of its professors, to the archive, the library, and also the ancient manuscripts that they have,
Yes.
and
Wow.
we just hit the jackpot, like, because
Wow.
this thing came across a bowl of water, and
Dude, I
India is
love
like that,
Yes.
it's
That is so awesome, Andrew. Oh my gosh, what a great story. So
yeah,
cool, man.
yeah.
So, you're
So, so in terms of, I mean, I just had a lot of questions. I had at that point I had devoted a decent chunk of my life to yoga, and I wondered where it came from. And when I started, I was told it was 5,000 years old. And then, after a decade or two, books started coming out and said, well, actually, it's really about 100 years old.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and and
that's a little bit of
well, hang on, that's really different. And so, what do you mean? And so I was just very fortunate in who I met, and we were able to get an interview with Her Highness Promoted Devi Wadiyar, the Queen of Mysore at the
Yeah,
time,
that was cool
and
seeing
ask
her.
her.
Yeah.
And so the principal of the Maharaja's College, and other people who are, you know, very significant in Mysore's Sanskrit scholar community. And what I sort of took from all that, many things, of course, but Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, which certainly made available and popular by the Joyce family, and no questions, no questions. And in fact, to the best of my research, the series that we know and have practiced for decades was created by Pattabhi Joyce. And if you look at his syllabus for his 4-year course at the Maharaja's Sanskrit College, which he gave to a number of his early students, it has primary series for the first year, along with some text and some, I don't think pranayam yet, but from the second year on, there are pranayamas introduced and various texts, Yogacaravali, Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali Sutras, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and I think some others. I don't want to say anything I'm not totally certain of. Those are there for sure. And so it was no different than the syllabus of any other subject taught in a university. And you have to have one of those, and that was it. So I think that one of the most endearing things, and I know not everybody is enamored with this legacy, but he made this huge contribution to the work that he was doing, and never said anything about any of his own contribution. He, like, again, for a Western person, if we make a contribution to a field, if we come up with something new, we want to put our name on it. We would like to copyright it. We want to draw as much attention to that as possible and say, I am an innovator and I've created this new thing and I want everybody to know about it. And if you want to use it, you're welcome, but you have to pay me or at least acknowledge me, etc. Indians just don't do that.
Yeah.
They treasure Padampada and the lineage, and they very much want to belong to that lineage. And he never said a word, although he clearly did organize the postures in these orders and come up with this brilliant system that created a huge influence in all of modern yoga, really.
Yeah.
If you start looking at,
Yeah.
Vinyasa flow and Jivamukti and power yoga and all the kind of Ashtanga takeoffs, it was a giant contribution.
Yes.
So I appreciated that about him.
Yeah.
Mysore is a big place, and it's a big community. And as I continue to research more, it's been a center of yogic studies for hundreds of years. And it's always had this very high standard of academic excellence. And that's been supported through the Wadiyar kings down through the centuries, in fact. And they've had this long connection with the spiritual tradition that Krishnamacharya came from. He was an Iyengar, and they follow Vishishtadvaita and the teachings of Ramanuja. And so there's a really beautiful story to be told there. And Mysore Yoga Traditions was essentially about the early 1900s, and just asking the people, what do you think about the way yoga is being taught and practiced today? And if you had a message to give to the world about what yoga is all about, what would you say? And
Yes.
And we just learned a lot. Some of it was so over our heads. Some of those guys would start talking about things that we didn't know anything about, and
Yeah.
it took years to figure out, actually.
Oh, wow. I know. Great point, man. Wow. Well, I mean, one of the big takeaways for me upon viewing it is, having been indoctrinated in Ashtanga Yoga, hearing the origin stories that float around. And one of them, like you said, first thing you hear is 5,000 years. And then automatically there'll be this assumption that the primary, second, third series of Ashtanga have been taught this way in this order for, well, maybe back to some thousands. We don't know exactly where. And so, as you're interviewing different students of, and or students, third generation students of Krishnamacharya, hearing how there wasn't really a order to the syllabus uh, beyond individuality per each person. You know, like poses were just given and taught, and they maybe were structured differently for each person. And I feel like I've always heard Mr. BKS Iyengar was taught differently from Patabi Joyce, and the order maybe, but also the manner. But to hear how your research points that the origin was more of a individually orientated teaching method to how it has been structured, I just find really refreshing. I'm just grateful that you've taken the time to dig in and look for answers, because it feels like it puts a light on a situation where when you're just kind of guessing and you hear myths and stories over time, you just kind of accept like that's exactly what it is. So to have you dig in like this, and obviously we could keep digging. And I love the
Oh
fact
yeah.
that you're bringing up like, wow, it took a long time to decipher some of the things these guys were talking about. We really aren't, it took a while to understand, because cross culturally there's a big divide often. So I mean, I'm enamored and fascinated by your work. That's so cool. What other sort of insights appeared? I mean, for me to actually, because one of the stories I heard from my teacher Tim Miller about the Yoga Korunta is that is this mysterious text that existed, and then a couple of Tim would always joke around that, like, whenever we would get to a pose like Kapotasana, he'd have us do a research pose of like a virasana or a supta virasana, where you have your knees together, heels apart, lay back, and kind of stretch your quads. And he'd joke around and say that, the ants must have eaten the supta virasana part of the posture out of the sequence, and so you hear that, but to actually see the footage that you got of these leaves where all these Sanskrit slokas are written on, and how they're being preserved, and the challenge of preservation, needing to oil them so the ants don't eat them. And to actually see that personally for me was like, whoa, that is so amazing. That's so cool. What was some of your feeling when you were seeing those ancient manuscripts opened up in front of you? What was the feeling that you got when you saw that?
Well, it was so impactful. They will sometimes let you hold them in your hands. They're delicate. And while there aren't really ants that eat them, there's a kind of mite, and it makes little holes. And I have seen, you know, this with my own eyes, and I've seen fragmented palm leaves that are just barely there, and you bump it wrong and it's gonna fall down in pieces. Um, and then the idea that, like, okay, we really love this yoga stuff and we're just all about it and we're ready to make our living doing it and we're like so yoga, shouldn't we take care of the community and the culture that's kind of trying to hold on to its roots and preserve the knowledge that they do have? Or are we really kind of more interested in branding and marketing a particular style of yoga postures and all the kind of ramifications of that? Now, to speak briefly on this question of the age of primary series, I don't believe that Patabi Joyce was telling a bold-faced lie when he said that. Um, eh, no one ever called him a liar, and what he meant, it's my opinion, and vinyasa is derived from Surya Namaskar. And when you do a vinyasa, it's obvious that you're doing a part of a Surya Namaskar. And Krishnamacharya comes from a religious background that worships the sun. And Narayana is their primary deity, and the icon for Narayana is the sun. And when you look back textually, you can find Narayana and Surya. You find all the rituals to Surya in the Rig Veda. And this idea of prostrating to the sun, this Ashtanga Namaskar, and the idea of doing mantras and movements with your body and creating these straight lines, these angles and triangles, and worshiping the sun. So that's all there. And and of course there are many kinds of Surya Namaskars. Something doesn't, get passed down for thousands of years and stay exactly the same. You're gonna see, variances. And the one that we do in Ashtanga yoga is very modern, actually. But the concept that it comes from is old. And when you use that as the glue to stick together a whole system of exercise, in one way of looking at it, it's 5,000 years old, or as
Yes.
old as the Rig Veda. And,
Yes.
you're going to, I won't go into, all the like validation of dates and times. I just look at Wikipedia and say, well, whatever that says, it's not less than that. Okay. So,
Yeah.
but in that way, yeah, it's old. And in the context of yoga and the philosophy of yoga, the point of why you're doing it, all of that is has some antiquity to it. But of course, when it gets right down to primary series as we practice it and how we're doing it, and even the context of like, I'm going to stop by the yoga studio on my way home from the office and I'm going to work out for an hour and a half, and then I'm going to go home and I don't know, watch Netflix or whatever it is that I do. That's super modern.
Mm.
That's like really new, really new, less than 100 years. And prior to that, it was kind of a full-time gig. You had to abandon your material life and, go off into it. So about the Yoga Korunta, of course, it's the most sought after Indian manuscript probably in the world and talked about. And maybe there is some other very important one that I'm not aware of, but certainly in Ashtanga Yoga, it's known. And why isn't that available? Why in a culture of people that are trained to recite scripture with no variance for thousands of years, using mantra and using these systems of chanting, they're all about preserving ancient knowledge. And then here's this one that kind of slipped away. And thought a lot about that. And there was a moment decades ago in Maui where Patabi Joyce was sitting around with a bunch of people, and I think it was Richard Freeman or David Swinton. One of those early guys said, "Guruji, what about the Yoga Korunta? Can you tell us about that? And how can we, find it and read it?" And Patabi Joyce's wife, who's known as Amma, which I just means mother, of course, leans over and says, "Stop fooling him," and everybody heard it. And so there, at that moment, there was a little uncertainty about this Yoga Korunta. I think it, I think it existed. I, I, I suspect that maybe he never really wanted to bring it out because it doesn't have primary series in it. It's not going to
Ah.
validate what he, taught everybody to do.
Ah.
And it's true that it may have been destroyed by insects. That is a valid possibility. Someone said that it possibly got divided and passed around among the early students because they also kind of use these things to like worship, to put on their altar, and they light incense in front of it. That's another thing. Yoga, Hatha Padati was this thing that was discovered by Jason Birch maybe 10 years ago. It was signed by Korunta Ka, which could have been, it may have been that the Yoga Korunta was simply the yoga of a guy called Korunta. And Hatha Padati just means Hatha Yoga manual. And so there's some speculation there, but I spoke with Jason Birch about this. Very nice guy, very great scholar. Um, And he's continuing to look for the Korunta. So if he were completely convinced that he'd found it, I think he would keep looking because it is a lot of work to go chase after these kinds of things. So,
Wow.
yeah, um,
That's so,
we may never know.
yes.
We may never know, and maybe we don't need to.
Yeah. Oh, man. Thank you, Andrew. You've really been digging in and, and looking. I love it.
Absolutely.
I personally don't, I mean, gosh, that just makes so much more sense. To me, the idea that it was put together in a systematic form by Pattabhi Jois based off of his experience, that just makes really good sense. It seems like wouldn't, I mean, I hope I don't, I mean, I just want to be very respectful of culture and tradition. So I hope I don't tread on toes when I ask these kind of questions, although I know it can always push buttons, but I'm curious, doesn't it seem like every person that would teach yoga to some degree or another would have to personalize it as much as they would need to try to preserve it? You know, like in a way, like we learn stuff from our teachers and then we have to practice it. And through our own practice, we make assessments and change based off of the changes that are going on. And therefore it evolves into its own kind of unique expression of our interpretation of it. So if it were to push buttons for someone to have to recognize that Pattabhi Jois did that, seems odd to me because that's what I'm doing, but only naturally because my body and my own suffering and my own challenges are causing me to have to really look at things differently than I did 10, 20, 30 years ago. What are your thoughts on this challenge of preserving antiquity and evolution of what's necessary currently?
I'm right there on the same page with you. Um, Simply put, Krishnamacharya taught Vinyasa flow and Vinyasa krama, which is a very, very well-known and understood concept in Mysore. Everybody knows. And Pattabhi Jois was doing demonstrations, and he needed to kind of fix it into a particular format, and he did a brilliant job of that. Um, that's my understanding anyway. Now, anything that I say could be wrong. There could be some new research that uncovers a different angle. I know, but this is the best that I know at this point in my exploration of the subject. When we look at Ashtanga Yoga or Vinyasa, let's just say Vinyasa, you have to kind of take into account the context within which it was created. And as much as we would like to kind of think that it goes back forever and ever, it was actually created for a reason by a specific person who was asked to do a job. And I feel that the really under-recognized party in Ashtanga's history is the royal family. And so this king, Nawadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar, was an amazing human being. And when you look at all the stuff that this person did for his community, and also just as a yoga practitioner, he was a yogi, a king and a yogi. Um, he wanted to bring this like warrior spirit, this strength and athletic prowess into the royal family, into the youth of the royal family, and into the community in general. So that was Krishnamacharya's job. Show the world that India can compete with anybody else's physical culture. We can be strong, we can be flexible, we can do weightlifting and wrestling and any other thing. And there is a debate as to how much foreign exercise might have influenced this yoga. And I mean, I think it probably did in the sense that he was competing with it. He needed to show that he could make these scrawny Indian kids into the same kind of athletes that came from these other countries. So of course he's looking at this. And I don't really know, but he came up with a recipe. And I do, I'm studying Yoga Taravali right now with Dr. Nagaraj Rao, and the Mysore Yoga Traditions online studies program is an ongoing thing and very rewarding for me. And Tribanda is there. He basically picked out some Hatha Yoga techniques, created some mojo with his own tradition, with the sun salutations, threw in the bandhas, threw in the drishti, and made the race car of his career. The
Wow.
the
Yes.
fastest, coolest, most impressive, eh, awesome system to,
Yes.
that was not for old people. It was not for, fixing the broken. It was for exalting the youth. And when you look at the books that he wrote and the teachers that he trained and his overall life's contribution to yoga, you can see that Ashtanga yoga is not the main part of that. It's a relatively small part.
Wow.
And so
Yes.
for folks like me and you who are not 20, let's say, and we've been doing this for a long time, and there are these like almost a generation of burned out Ashtangis. There's like I did it, I'm broken, I can't even do half the stuff I used to. This system doesn't work, and I don't think that's really fair. I think that you can take it in its essence. Bandha's work, pranayama, and I mean that's another side of it. But there's a core structure of Ujjayi breathing and Drishti and Bandha and Surya Namaskar and one breath per movement, Vinyasa technique that I do think works for everybody. And I love primary series. Everything I do is based on primary series. It's like if you know the multiplication tables, you're just better at math. And so Ashtanga people always look like they know what they're doing because they do know what they're doing. They've done it over and over and over, and they know exactly what comes next. And that level of refinement is beautiful. And then from a teacher perspective, you've done it, I've done it, we've all done it. You stand up in front of the people and you're like, well, the next thing in the series, no, they can't do that. Okay, let's skip that. And we pull out what we think is going to work under a given circumstance, but that foundation and structure is there. I mean, how many teachers all over the world are doing like a warm up and then some kind of sun salutation as much as they think the group can do, and then some standing postures and some sitting postures and maybe a little inversion and finishing in shavasana. Like this is it's kind of a template that really works well. It's not the only one, but it's a good one. So I really do find the authenticity and sacredness of primary and Ashtanga yoga exactly as you're saying. What should you just wreck your body to uphold a tradition? I'm a traditional yogi. Your tradition is 100 years old, dude. Like it's not,
Yes. Yes.
worth breaking ourselves for. So yeah.
Yes, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you. So many questions. Before I go into a more philosophical question, I'd like to hear about then the turn where B&S Iyengar, your teacher, or and I'm sure you have lots of teachers, but your main teacher, one of your main teachers, was then because he does appear quite a bit in the documentary. So then he says no. You start to, okay, we're gonna go. You get this incredible opportunity to meet all these folks with the Sanskrit college. And at some point, then what's the next part of this part where Mr. Iyengar says,
We
wait,
talked him into it.
maybe,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, we talked him into it. And you did it just delicately enough where there wasn't a tenuous situation and time just kind of, it just happened. I don't know. I just
Well,
find these little
when when
details
he
fascinating.
saw that
Yeah.
when he saw that we were doing interviews with other people, and that he would just be a part of a larger project. He was comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
He he just didn't want to be the headline of the whole thing, and he felt it would be arrogant in some sense in
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
way of understanding.
Which
So we
shines
got him in the end.
that shines light to the fact of what you made mention about, Patabi Joyce putting this together, but not necessarily wanting to sign his name on the line at the bottom. And this cultural norm of a cultural respect that comes with, look, it's not about me. I'm just a person here in this lineage or experience, which is fascinating. What sort of, when I started practicing Ashtanga yoga, there was no YouTube. And then now it's like for you and I to be on here and publishing this conversation on YouTube, I didn't sweat last night. My palms didn't sweat like it used to when I thought about putting a picture of myself on the internet. I just stressed about that. I thought I was being sacrilegious, or I was defaming the culture, or who am I? I kind of I was really appreciative of these Indian ideas of it's not about me, but now I feel really comfortable. Do you feel what has been your experience with comfortability with putting yourself out there and also still interfacing potentially with people in a cultural setting that are kind of like, I don't know about this. What is this person's intentions? What will this turn into? Will I have crazy people knocking on my door? And, how do you, where are you at with all this?
Well, I think there's a middle path. Um, there's there's a lot of good and bad about the internet and social media and all of this. And like you, I'm somebody creating content and putting it out there, and to pretend that we don't care if anyone notices is not really honest. Of course we do. And when you see the numbers of your podcast climbing, I mean, it feels good. You feel like your hard work was recognized, and people enjoyed what you put out there, and it enriched somebody's life, and they subscribed. That's it, ultimately. But when the intention behind it is egotistical, when we're like really attached to what other people think, rather than, oh, I feel like I have some valid information for those who really would like this, I'm going to put it out there. What happens is, it's a karma yoga perspective. That just basic, not what's in it for me, but what can I do to help? And I'm going to do that with sincerity and integrity. And what comes of it, I don't know. I'm just doing it because I need to do it. And with that attitude, I feel like it's all fine. Whenever, I'm nervously glancing at Instagram to see how many likes my last post got, and I'm like, oh, that's not enough. I guess nobody cares. All this vibe, it's not yoga. It's just basic human junk that people have dealt with forever, and there's nothing special about it. Nothing like so terrible about it, but it's not evolved. It's not yoga. We all have, to act like I don't have that in me somewhere is just not true. I'm working on it, but it's not the part that I'm trying to grow bigger. So it's a digital world, and in the age of information, nobody believes anything per se. It's like it's all such information override. You can find out anything you ever wanted to know in 2 seconds, and then, but validating it is different. And, so
Yes. Well
in a way,
said.
you and I are doing the same thing. We're just trying to help.
Well said. Thank you, Andrew. In relation to what I really appreciated is the kind of synapse that you helped me form with seeing like when you talked about the sun salutation and the antiquity of the vinyasa, the movement, and that being the core essence, and then the understanding of the Sanskrit language in terms of its mathematical nature, its geometrical aspects to it, which I'm still trying to understand more fully. I remember the first time I heard that idea, I thought, a language and math? What? You know what I mean? Like I just never even contemplated that. And then just now, or earlier in our conversation today, you made mention of the uh, sequential order. Like at this one point, it was codified into here's a system, and then as a Ashtanga yogi, practicing the system over and over again. And I love that you just helped me connect when you said the if I know my multiplication tables, I'm just better at math. Like that, for me, that visual of understanding that if I study uh, the core components of the beginnings of really complex math, calculus, all these other things. I guess what I'm getting at, can you help share a little bit of light that you've come to with understanding the connection between the Sanskrit language and what we're doing with our bodies and the movements of yoga, and what kind of connections there are in relation to the mechanics of the language and the mechanics of the movement? Is it kind of the same thing? Is it one expression? Is it like one core that comes out either through a sound vibration or we put it out into a physical manifestation? What is your insight into the connection of these components?
Well, yeah, Sanskrit is absolutely essential to understanding Indian thought. And in terms of its numerology is a big, big deal in India. And they have their own, like, there's a reason why there are 10 counts in the first sun salutation and 18 counts in the second sun salutation. And those were not arbitrary choices. There is a connection between Indian classical music and vinyasa. And so these counts and these timings, I think it probably has more to do with numerology and things like jata and tala and raga and concepts like that. But it was always supposed to be spoken in Sanskrit. And and as I understand, originally the student was supposed to stand in samistiti, recite the posture and the number of vinyasas that it requires to enter the posture. Like, for instance, most of the sitting postures in primary series, it takes 8 vinyasas to get into it, assuming you don't have any trouble. So you raise your arms 1, you go down 2, inhale, head up 3, and by the time you do a push-up and sit down and take your foot and bind it into Ardha Baddha Padma or whatever it is, it's going to be 8. And that concept of we're so precise that we know how many counts it takes to get into this, and we know exactly the name of it and everything about it, and we recite that each time we do it. This is a kind of a drill that's designed to create the sort of impressive practitioners that were required at the time. Um, so there's a lot of ingredients, and we may not necessarily understand all of them. But one point, kind of to digress a little bit, um, it was this king, Nalwadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar, who paid Krishnamacharya to teach what he taught. And it kind of goes back to this recipe for making very capable practitioners. And that's what the king wanted. That's what he asked for.
Mm.
And he also was the person who insisted that it be shared even openly with the community and to disregard the caste system because, originally it was only like for Brahmins and Kshatriyas, of course, are the king class. Kings are usually Kshatriyas. Um, but much more significantly, to teach it to women because there is a story of, Indra Devi's mother was some French diplomat, and she was hanging out with the king of Mysore, and her young daughter wants to do yoga, and the king said, "Well, I happen to have a wonderful yoga teacher. Why don't you, go study with him?" And Krishnamacharya said, "No, I can't touch this girl. I'm not supposed to come within 12 inches of this girl, and I don't. This is not for me." And the king said, "No, no, you have to teach her." And so the teaching of women, the teaching of everybody in the community, and the idea that this should be something to make youth blossom into amazing, capable athletes, that really came from the king,
Ah,
as far as I understand. And then so in my kind of thinking, Krishnamacharya is great, no doubt, but it could be said that the father of modern yoga, the unknown father of modern yoga, is the king,
yeah.
you know?
Wow. And so, segue into the fact that you're creating a part two documentary called, I believe, Kings and Yogis. King,
Yeah.
do I have that right, correct? And so, I wanted to watch that right away after I finished the other one. And it looks like you're close. It looks like from the information on your website, you're close to releasing it. Can you talk?
We're not as close as we would like to be.
Okay, okay.
I'm,
What's the
I've
holding?
realized
What's
that
holding you?
I
What's
can't do it
yeah?
without funding.
Hmm.
I have to gather some resources to push it on through.
Understood.
I have most of what I need to make it. And I thought that I was going to do it just in my spare time, like I was just going to stay up a little late and spend a few hours each evening. And it didn't happen. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I kind of had to deal with some other things. I've got like the core of it, and Kings and Yogis deals not so much with 19th century, but what was the sort of cultural context that all of this evolved out of, and if we are to have a padampada, and any, like that term gets thrown around a lot, and it's not necessarily understood properly by everybody, but it means that which is passed down from generation to generation, fundamentally. And it can be bloodlines, it can be teachers to student, but there should be some ancient tradition, right? I mean, it's like we always thought that that had to be there, but actually nobody knows what that is or
Mm.
has any real clear. Like if you had to point to it, who would you point to? It's a little murky. At least it has been for me, and I just wanted to share my research about that. So when we follow the postures, there's a lot of great books that have been done and great research, and we don't know how old these poses are. And there's the story of Krishnamacharya studying with this Rama Mohan Brahmachari. We've all read it, but to my knowledge, nobody knows anything about this guy. They don't even know what language he spoke. It's not even totally clear where he was. Somewhere in the Himalayas, maybe India, maybe Nepal, maybe Tibet. It just depends on what you read. And whoever he was, nobody knows about him. And so you can argue different things. You can say, well, yoga is ancient and, starting about maybe the 8th or 9th century, you see it in temples and so on. But in the end, it's a big question mark. When you try to follow the spiritual lineage that Krishnamacharya came from, and if you think of it as a spiritual practice, then it makes sense to follow the spiritual lineage. And if you think of it as just purely a physical practice, then it makes more sense that you'd want to know about the postures. And I mean, fair enough. We want to know about the postures first because that's what we started with, and that's legit. But then if you go a bit further, this spiritual lineage is actually very easy to trace. And 1,000 years ago, a little more, Ramanuja emerged onto the scene. He was part of an earlier Parampara of Sri Vaishnavas, and he founded Vishishtadvaita. He he appointed 74 priests and called them Iyengar, the keeper of 5 rituals. Everybody in the world who has the name Iyengar can trace their ancestry back to one of those 74 guys. And many people, I think, who may not necessarily have Iyengar in their name have that ancestry. And they're not necessarily related by blood, because there are 74 of them. And the Anantacharya line is the one that I'm studying under. And he was one of the close people with Ramanuja. And so like people like Dr. Alwar and Lakshmi Tadachar, his father, who I studied with for years before he passed, they can trace their ancestry from father to eldest son back for 1,000 years to Ramanuja, and they've kept this knowledge intact, passing it down in their family. And so when I figured that out, I was like, well, guys, what's the knowledge? Tell me, like, how can I, start to learn about it? And even though I'm like a kindergartner and you're a, college professor, like, meet me where I'm at. Come on, what can I do to learn?
Yes.
And it's Lakshmi Tadachar, I didn't even know who he was, actually. Anybody whose name ends with char is an acharya. That's not a it's a big deal. And but this guy made time to talk to me for 3.5 years, like every week.
Wow.
And
Yes.
with
Yes.
no didn't ask for money, didn't ask for anything. And sometimes he would be busy, he would be traveling, and it was only when he died that Alwar sent me a little pamphlet about his spiritual lineage, and I realized, oh my God, that's no wonder he was so busy. And it was very humbling for me.
Wow.
So
That's
so
cool, Ange.
Ramanuja dug up this ancient deity called Chalavanarayana and installed it. He had a vision and went and dug up this ancient deity, this Narayana. Chalava is beautiful. And they, made Chalavanarayana temple in Melkote. I do a retreat there every year. Um, and then 400 years ago, these Wadiyar kings came down from Dwarka, I believe, and they wanted to go to Melkote to see this deity and take its blessing. And then they had a dream, and they went to Mysore and they conquered this Maheshasura, whose name, Mysore comes from the name of this person that they defeated in battle, and they saved a girl. There was a girl who's was of marriageable age, and her mother was queen, and this Maheshasura was going to force her to marry him so he could have the kingdom. And the Wadiyars stepped in and defeated him, and one of them married this girl. And and they say that when that first king died, as legend has it, a flash of light left his body and flew back to Chalavanarayana at the temple in Melkote. So, from the very earliest history of the Wadiyar dynasty in Mysore, there's been a strong connection with Melkote and with this lineage of yoga and spirituality practiced by Krishnamacharya's line. And um, like there was this Saraswati library. One of the kings compiled all the philosophy from the whole region and wanted to keep it safe and safeguard it. Another king wrote the Sri Tattvanidhi. That's well known. That was like around the end of the 18th century, 122 yoga postures. There were hip kings doing stuff with yoga way before Krishnamacharya's time.
Yeah. Yes.
And so like as a practitioner, and like especially in light of Sharat's passing and everybody's grieving and a little unsure as to what what next, and there are, strong opinions, of course, and I don't want to step on any toes. Bless anybody who's got enough discipline to do their yoga, and I don't care whose student you are or what kind of flag we fly under. But the tradition of yoga in Mysore is old. It's very old, and it's beautiful, and it's very rich. And to think that there's only one person who carried that is just not true. And historically, it's crystal clear that this is a community and a university and a royal family and a lineage of yoga that's been passed down. And this, when you really start reading about all the different important people in the lineage, and like there's a story of some yogi from Melkote won a debate held by the king of Mysore at the time. And he won this debate and he was given 26 villages. That's the Mandya district. It's full of Iyengars, and it's right outside of Mysore, and still today they live there. And like the history of all this, how all this happened, and this. So that's why kings and yogis. I want to tell that story, and just kind of celebrate the richness of the tradition. And at the end of the day, I love yoga and Mysore, and I just feel like these people, they're so gracious. You're not going to outgive these guys. Like as soon as you show you're interested and even just a little bit worthy of something, they are so giving and so kind. And then the only thing that gets you a little bit in trouble, if you start turning around and arguing with them about dates and times and saying, no, you're lying about how old this is. I don't appreciate that so much.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
It's like go and learn, but don't start questioning the dates and times. That's not going to help.
Everything goes forever.
So
by default, if you ask, how
yes,
old is this? They'll just tell you it's very, very old. And that's true always in the same sense that primary series is 5,000 years old. If you look at like the ingredients of it and the continuum of people who've arrived at this, in their mind, it's all very old.
Wow, Andrew. Oh, thank you so much. Everything I learned so much today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your passion and dedication. I mean, luckily there's people like you, and thank you. I really just feel gratitude right now. I don't know if I have any other questions for you. I have lots of other questions for you, but I think you gave so much great information and helped me to see the my yoga picture has gotten a little bit clearer and broader and clearer at the same time.
Well, it's an honor to speak, and thank you so much for reaching out and patiently waiting for me to find a time that I could talk. And anytime, I love to talk about yoga, of course.
Oh man, thank you, Andrew. I look forward to a future conversation, and I really hope that listeners will be inspired and help with funding for your project and continue it on because it's I think really enlightening. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will mention briefly,
please.
I made that film, Mysore Yoga Traditions, of course, and I just had such a profound experience making it that I thought I should invite all my friends and whoever wants to come, and we should all just hang out with these guys. And so that's how Mysore Yoga Conference started. And we started bringing groups every year and inviting various scholars to come and give talks. And then that kind of emerged into this Melkote immersion. We found out how amazing Melkote was. So, of course, we go there. And this year we have a 200-hour immersion, which is kind of includes everything. So I'm very much in the I try to give people the opportunity to go to Mysore and experience this tradition firsthand. And I feel like that's like, no matter how much you read and talk, it's really important to actually go there and be in it at some point if it's possible. So
when is that? When is the date of the next conference?
January 19th through 28th is the conference. My 200-hour immersion starts on the 12th of January, and the Melkote immersion is the 1st through the 8th of February. So it's all coming up. In
2026.
2 months.
Wow. Well, I want to go.
Come on down.
Man. I'm a little speechless just because I'm so I just feel so excited right now. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been a true pleasure, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you. You're such a gracious host. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, what did you think? That was Andrew Eppler, the founder of the Ashtanga Yoga Studio and the creator of the films, the Mysore Yoga Tradition and the upcoming Kings and Yogis. I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation and that you gained a deeper appreciation for the living history of yoga and the teachers who keep these traditions alive. Remember, go visit Andrew on his website, Mysore Yoga Traditions, to learn about his upcoming trainings and his documentary work. If you'd like to explore more yoga conversations and practices, head to our website at nativeyogacenter.com. Check out our full library of interviews here on this podcast, Native Yoga Toddcast. You can find them on all the listening channels, Apple, Amazon, Spotify. Obviously, you're hearing me now, so you found, so you probably don't need to hear all this. But nonetheless, thank you for your support. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep practicing, keep learning, and just keep sharing the yoga journey. All right. Thank you. Namaste. Native Yoga Toddcast is produced by myself. The theme music is dreamed up by Bryce Allen. If you like this show, let me know. If there's room for improvement, I want to hear that too. We are curious to know what you think and what you want more of, what I can improve. And if you have ideas for future guests or topics, please send us your thoughts to info@Native Yoga Center. You can find us at nativeyogacenter.com. And hey, if you did like this episode, share it with your friends, rate it and review, and join us next time.